In today's video, we're going to be talking about inflammation. Thank you for watching the last video. Hopefully you saw it on weight loss and hormones and thyroid and looking at fasting insulin levels. If you haven't seen that video on weight loss, I will put a link in the show notes below. So if you've heard me talk about inflammation before, I'm going to relate this back to difficulties in losing weight. If we have inflammation systemically, if we have gut inflammation, or if we have inflammation due to food sensitivities, these are three areas that I encourage you to look at with your practitioner and see if we can identify, again, the root cause of why you can't lose weight. So let's get into today's content. 5 markers of inflammation I would encourage you to look at with your provider to help identify if it's inflammation that is hanging you up from your ability to lose weight. The first one I would encourage you to look at is something called C-Reactive Protein, or CRP. CRP is a simple blood test that your provider can perform. And in looking at that, you want to make sure that in my opinion, your C-reactive protein is below 1, and ideally even less than 0.5. My C-reactive protein currently is at 6, and there's a couple of reasons I have identified, possible reasons for that. And again, you may not necessarily know if you have a high inflammatory C-reactive protein going on in your blood. And so again, have that level checked. It may not be obvious. It's an inflammatory marker that can be elevated, and you really don't feel the effects of that other than maybe your body's inability to lose weight, but you don't feel this like in your joints or anything to that, like a traditional inflammatory problem that we might think of, or in your GI tract. The second marker that I want you to look at is something called TNF-alpha, or tumor necrosis factor alpha. TNF-alpha is secreted by adipose tissue. So if we have an elevated level of TNF-alpha, it potentially is again hanging up your ability to lose weight. The other issue with TNF-alpha, if this is elevated in your blood, is that this also can lead to insulin resistance. So bottom line, besides your C-reactive protein, take a look at TNF-alpha. The third inflammatory molecule I would encourage you to look at, have your practitioner test you for, is IL-6, or interleukin 6. Interleukin 6 has been associated, it's a pro-inflammation interleukin, and IL-6 has been linked to insulin resistance and obesity and metabolic syndrome. So again, if something's hanging you up, again, you don't have this, you have a really hard time losing weight, again, it's C-reactive protein, TNF-alpha, and IL-6. Now there is another interleukin that I would encourage you to look at, which actually, if this level is elevated or in the normal range, I'll say, this is to your favor, and that's IL-10. IL-10, or interleukin 10, has anti-inflammatory properties to it, so it reduces inflammation in your body. So I always like to balance that out too. If you're going to do an IL-6 and a TNF-alpha, see if your provider can also measure your IL-10 level. It's a good indicator if your body has built-in mechanisms to help reduce inflammation. The second barrier I want to talk about tonight that can really, again, cause issues with weight loss is gut inflammation. So we just talked about, again, CRP, C-reactive protein, TNF-alpha, interleukin 6, and the anti-inflammatory IL-10. But what about gut inflammation? So there's a lot of issues going around with different conditions: Crohn's, IBS, SIBO, SIFO, all dysbiosis. We can have all types of GI inflammation going on. So how do we really measure that? What can we really look at? I like to do a gut permeability test, or basically a leaky gut syndrome test, to look at not so much gut inflammation, but gut permeability, because ultimately that permeability will translate in most cases to inflammation systemically. So there's a great company out there called KBMO that we utilize here at the pharmacy to help us measure candida, if that is in the blood, which it shouldn't be. We also look at zonulin. Zonulin's a protein essentially that fills up the tight junctions, or those enterocytes, those cells that line the GI tract. They are only one cell thick, right, that are between the GI tract, between your stomach or your intestines and your bloodstream. And so zonulin comes in, and it's kind of like the glue that holds everything, or the mortar that holds all the bricks together, so to speak. That zonulin should be between those cells in your GI tract. It should not be in your blood. Again, we can test for it though. If zonulin is elevated in your blood, that's a problem or an indicator that you've got leaky gut syndrome, and we need to correct that. Let's look at one more category that I often see, again, patients that are really struggling to lose weight that hangs them up, and that is basically toxicity, or GI toxicity, liver toxicity, where we have an inability to cleanse our body, clean our blood out. It's kind of like, basically we neglect our liver and our GI tract sometimes as the detox pathway to get all of the pesticides, herbicides, artificial flavorings, artificial dyes out of our food. All of that really, in an ideal sense, shouldn't even be there. And we all know this, of course. Nobody really likes to talk about detox and cleanses and so forth, but I think it's really important to make sure that your liver is functioning optimally so it can get rid of all the crap, literally, and that we're pooping, right? Let's be honest. A lot of us are constipated and we don't eat enough fiber, we don't drink enough water. So we got to make sure that our liver can detoxify our blood, get rid of all of the unnecessary material that's floating around in the blood. And then we need to have basically our small and large intestines working efficiently so that we take a crap every morning or noon or night, or hopefully sometime during the day, right? So if you haven't done a detox cleanse, I encourage you to do that. Again, check with your provider before starting any type of cleanse, but this is something that can be critically important to, again, helping you just get over that barrier, that hump, in helping you lose weight. We've got to have clean metabolic detox pathways in our body in order for us to effectively lose weight. The third barrier, or the third opportunity that I would like patients to look at if they have a hard time losing weight, is to look at food sensitivities. So we have a new food sensitivity kit here available to us at the pharmacy. I personally have done this myself. Actually, my 10-year-old daughter has done this as well too, and I found this to be very insightful, not only for losing weight, but for a multitude of other health issues. So patients suffering with any kind of skin condition or any type of headaches or migraines, they may want to, I would encourage you to look at food sensitivities. And again, this is not allergies where we're talking anaphylactic, but sensitivities, and there's a difference there. I'm not going to get into that completely right now in this video. That might be a video for in the future. But we can look at food sensitivities, and again, this ultimately might be leading to inflammation further downstream. I just talked about the interleukins and TNF-alpha. Looked at C-Reactive Protein, and some of these sensitivities, dairy is a good example, gluten is another example. If we're sensitive, not allergic, but sensitive to these materials in our foods, this ultimately could be hindering our ability to lose weight. So again, bottom line, I encourage you to look at food sensitivity testing and see if that is what's hanging you up from getting to your weight goals. So let's get into the supplement. So here it is. It's Alpha Lipoic Acid. This was studied back in 2019, essentially. It was published in 2020, again in the Journal of Nutrition. I'll put a link in the show notes below. Long story short, I'll kind of cut to the chase. It was a 24-week study, so 6 months. At the end of that 6 months, there was a statistically significant difference, try saying that 3 times fast, in regards to weight loss, specifically fat. So they looked at, again, BMI, they looked at a couple of different blood markers, but the one that I want to point out today is the percent of body fat. In the control group, they lost percent of body fat around, let me look at the notes here real quick, it was 8.6%. In the study group, the patients that received 600 milligrams of alpha lipoic acid, they lost 9.4% body fat. Now that may not seem like a big difference, 8.6, 9.4, but statistically this was. And ultimately, what I would like to share with patients is, again, this is something that you may want to consider. If you've looked at all other options, everything else is in line. Again, this is an over-the-counter supplement. It's something that you can, again, potentially easily supplement with the approval with your provider. So thank you for tuning in. I hope you got some value out of today's video. If you did, I always encourage you to give this video a thumbs up and share this with a loved one. I want you to live an optimal, healthy life. I will see you next week. Till next time, have a great night.